All right, welcome back to VP Culture Value Science class, and we're going to be talking about values more in depth here, and we're going to be looking at experiential values once again and focusing on the value of harmony. So again, we've been talking about all the different creational values that we create. What are the little things that you do that will go on to create the experiential values of harmony specifically? Now let's expand again this experiential values. And remember, we're talking about the calming side right now, and then there's the excitatory side. The calming side is made up of trust, harmony, and peace. We'll be looking at harmony today. Excitatory will be wisdom, nobility, and joy, and we'll look at those later down the line. So let's focus on harmony. It sounds like a very idealistic notion, but it really is about how do you get people, once they trust you, to start functioning together. It's like, this is, do I trust you? Do we trust each other? Now let's start defining our interactions together and how we're going to work together. That's what harmony is all about. Okay, this is harmony. The fundamental question for harmony is, can we do life together? Once you've gotten past trust, the question is, can we do life together? Can we get our lives together? There have been people that I do trust, but we failed to reach great levels of harmony because we weren't able to figure this out. So it's very important that we can do life together well. Harmony is made up of these three subsets: order, empathy, and humility. So once again, do you as a leader, can you tell me exactly how to create harmony, the experience? You should be able to say it's order, empathy, and humility, to name those three subsets just like that. So again, this is going to take a little experience, a little bit of work. And then you're going to have to talk about these things with your teams so that you can say, how do we create order? How do we create empathy? How do we create humility when we're working together? So let's look at the first one, order. Now, order, you think, how important is this? But this is critical to every organization. When you get a group of people together, we have these circuits that are called social learning circuits. And they will begin to try to establish order immediately based on various criteria that we see in our environment. When you walk in the room, who's the biggest, strongest person? Well, that'll create a sense of order. Who's the person who has the corner office? Who has other symbols of status? Like, that person has a nicer coat than I do. That person, and we start to do this automatically. Our brain starts doing this and setting things in order. And when we set things in order, does everyone know their boundaries? Not in a, like, trying to restrict people in unhealthy ways, but we're trying to define the locations and the order in which, like, this person has this amount of authority, this person has responsibilities over this, these people interact in these ways. The more that we can define our interactions in a healthy way, the more that we're going to bring order and harmony into our organizations. Hierarchies are not the boogeyman. Unbeknownst to a lot of popular literature that says hierarchies are the problem. No, we've all experienced hierarchies that are devoid of these values, and that's why we don't like them. But the hierarchies and the power is not the problem. The problem is not using the values to serve and create experiential values for others. And one of the great things that you can do as a leader is to establish everyone's boundaries well. Because in every culture, in every group of people, this needs to be done. It'll either be done explicitly by you, or it will be fought out in each individual relationship with varying qualities of dialogues and maneuvers and things like that. And you're going to have a lot of wasted energy. It's proven that hierarchies are the most efficient way for us to live in society, because we don't have to waste time fighting over who does what or who has authority to do what. And those that are in the highest points of leadership that serve others, we'll see, create the most harmony in their organizations, not those that lord it over. So the opposite of order is disorder, is fighting over boundaries. When you leave your staff and your teams to just duke it out, figure out for yourself where you should be, who's doing what, who's on, it's not that you need to dictate everything. Perhaps there's discussions. Perhaps there's interactions. but the clarity needs to come, and you're the one that needs to lead them into that clarity so that they can experience order within your culture. The next one is empathy. We've talked about this in our emotional science course, but what is empathy? Do we connect emotionally? So you need to be able to actually be able to speak to one another in those emotional languages that we delved into more deeply in the emotional science course. This is the values expression of that is empathy. Can we actually connect on that level? And do we get each other in our interpersonal reactions on an emotional level? Because we go beyond trust into connection, into this level. And the opposite of empathy is what I'm going to call apathy or neglect. It's when someone is not engaged with, when someone is left isolated, when someone is left out of that emotional engagement, they're going to feel neglected. So the boss that stays, the leader that stays off in his office and never comes out is going to not create empathy. So oftentimes we think it's about the emotional engagement. It's about the time that you spend away from each other that oftentimes affects this more than anything else. Okay, next is humility. How do we create humility? What is that? Oftentimes, humility, people have this misconception that it's, I need to look at myself as being small and insignificant. It's really what it is elevating others, seeing the awesomeness in others. When I elevate everyone else, then everyone else it's going to seem like I'm below, but because I've been actively elevating everyone else. When I see the awesomeness in others, doesn't mean that I'm not awesome, that I don't have traits and good things to bring. I don't have to have some sort of false sense of humility that I don't talk about what I'm good at. But the primary thing is, do you release the awesomeness in others? So we talked about a little bit of this in personality science. Understanding what people are great at, understanding their gifts, understanding what they do is great, and reinforcing that. All right, the opposite of humility is kind of feeling like you're the only one that you can trust to do things right. If you find yourself blaming and saying things like this, I'm the only one that can do things right, you're not finding the awesomeness in others. You're not letting go. You're not letting others people do things. So that's one of the primary things, a primary look at how you will exhibit a lack of humility is saying that you're the only one that can do things right. All right, so harmony is these three things: order, empathy, and humility. You can create those experiences within your organization. You're going to start to create more and more harmony within your organization. So how do we create harmony? So, like for example, in order, do we have clear roles and responsibilities written down? Do we have roles and responsibilities that are unclear and let people fight for them? And what's going on there with our lack of clarity? Do we neglect that? Empathy. Do we talk about our energy and our stories together, or do we ignore people and neglect people with our apathy? Humility. Do we discuss personalities? Do we have it all worked out so that people know exactly what they're great at? Or do we roll our eyes and say, I'm the only person that can get this done? So talking about how you can create these things within your organization is what is going to be able to give you the power to create these things in greater detail so that you can create great experiences within your organization that will create great culture. All right, let's look at the science here. Hierarchies. I talked about this a little bit. Hierarchies are not the boogeyman. In fact, people who are great leaders are going to be higher in serotonin. And then when you have a great hierarchy, you are actually going to increase the serotonin on everyone involved. Yes, unfortunately, the people at the bottom of the hierarchy usually have less serotonin, and that leads to less well-being. Here's the caveat with that. If they are not in a healthy hierarchy, they will have even lower levels of serotonin. They will be what we call isolated. Isolation and loneliness is the worst place to put a human being. It's like solitary confinement. That's why it's the worst form of punishment we can give someone. Not only isolating them from society, but even isolating them from the prison population. So having a healthy hierarchy where those on the top of the hierarchy serve others, that is the healthiest form of hierarchy. The people who have what we call social affiliative behaviors towards the others in their hierarchies have even more serotonin and create more of a healthy cascade. and it tamps down people trying to fight and to destroy one another within hierarchies. So it creates stability, it creates peace, it elevates everyone within the organization to have a more greater sense of well-being. So creating harmony within your organization is essential. The science of servant leadership. So the more service that you give, the more serotonin you're going to develop within every person in your organization. So the idea is not to use your power for power and control, but to use your power to elevate everyone around you. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Maria Rens. You don't hear about her. You hear about Jeff Bezos and Amazon, where she helped lead. She was very emotionally honest with people. She was able to go into the teams and deliver the candid news that need to be said, but she was also great at setting up structures. So she would keep the structures within Amazon working harmoniously because she was able to do and create good order within the organization. She was also great at finding the awesomeness in other people. In every situation that she was involved with, she would elevate talent and encourage the talent of the people on every team around her. She wasn't ever known as the person that was going to be the person that was doing it by herself and could only do it her way. She acted consistently, and she elevated the harmony in her team by connecting with them emotionally and creating great sense of empathy between them. So in her tenure, she took Amazon from $107 billion to $233 billion in business. And she was, under her tenure, Amazon was able to create the first $1 trillion business valuation. Under her tenure, Amazon reached $1 trillion in valuation because she created great harmony within the organization, creating great experiential values that made a difference in the overall profitability of Amazon. Okay, so Dr. Morrison, he was a hard-nosed, great cardiologist with tons of skills. But every time that he got into a situation, he would take command and push his staff around. He wouldn't listen to the nurses. He wouldn't listen to his residents under his care. And soon, at a staff meeting, this came to a head. They were discussing the procedures on a particular patient, and they were going into it and on for about a half an hour. And then suddenly Dr. Morrison came in. He sat down and continued to listen for another 15 minutes, saying nothing, but showing disapproval with his eyes and his icy cold stare. And finally, at the end of 15 minutes more of discussion, he said, "Enough. We're going to go with the procedure that I had originally discussed, and that's it. I'm the only one who knows how to do anything around here." And he got up and left the meeting. That was like the final straw for his staff. They had had it. The senior leadership of the hospital didn't have the courage to lay off their top performing surgeon. He was making millions for them. And his reputation was known far and wide. But his reputation within the hospital was causing all sorts of disharmony and destructive behavior on their internal culture that was leading to staff leading one after the other for other hospitals in the area. And so finally, Dr. Morrison was offered a job in an independent clinic across the town, which he soon took. And he thought he could build his reputation, his practice better there. And that was a godsend because Dr. Carter was soon elevated to chief surgeon in that department of cardiology. And she took a different approach. She listened to people. They felt listened. They felt empathy. She created order by creating a new staff chart, that organizational chart that everyone knew where they stood within the organization, and there was less infighting. Her meetings were conducted with order, and she elevated the talent and the greatness of each individual within her organization. And soon things began to turn around, and that department began to thrive again and began to become more cohesive and started to not hemorrhage talent as it has and had in the past. Unfortunately, Dr. Morrison went on to his clinic, and it suffered the same fate once again because he brought in leadership that was disharmony and didn't create trust at all. And so his culture was never able to lead to anything other than him performing well as an individual. All right, let's look at some group questions. What does it feel like to be in a harmonious group? What does it feel like when a team is disorganized? What does it feel like when you're respected and listened to? Finally, what is worse, for you to be neglected or you to be micromanaged? What is worse? All right, well, that brings us to the end, to lesson number 4, where we focused on experiential values of harmony and how to create that. So thanks for listening, and join us next time in lesson number 5 in the Value Science course of VP Culture.